You used to explain yourself, to keep the peace, to be understood, to avoid being judged. You tried to make your silence make sense, your boundaries feel acceptable, your depth seem less intimidating. But no matter how carefully you worded things, people still misunderstood you, or worse, dismissed you altogether. That's when it hit you. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. You stopped offering explanations, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You realized that your peace doesn't require permission, and your life isn't a presentation for others to approve. This is why Sigma INFJs stop explaining themselves and why walking in quiet confidence becomes their greatest power. You got tired of being misunderstood no matter how clearly you explained yourself. You've spent years trying to explain who you are, your thoughts, your silence, your boundaries. You tried to phrase things just right so they wouldn't take it the wrong way. You repeated yourself with patience, hoping someone would finally get it. But over time, it started to wear you down. No matter how clearly you spoke, people only heard what they wanted. They twisted your meaning, questioned your intentions, or dismissed your truth altogether. Eventually, you realized the exhaustion didn't come from being misunderstood. It came from trying so hard to be understood by people who were never really listening. That's when you stopped chasing clarity and started protecting your energy. You learned that not every misunderstanding needs your correction, and not every silence needs to be explained. You realize that people only listen to understand you when it benefits them. At some point, you noticed a pattern. You'd open up, hoping to connect, but the response felt transactional. People listened just enough to respond, not to truly understand. They wanted insights when it served them, not because they valued your truth. You were expected to be deep, thoughtful, and emotionally available, but only on their terms. When your needs surfaced or your silence became uncomfortable, suddenly you were too much or too distant. That's when it hit you. Most people don't seek to understand you, they seek to use what they understand. And when your truth doesn't fit their comfort, they tune out. So you stopped handing your thoughts to those who only listen when they stand to gain. You began reserving your energy for people who don't just hear your words, but feel the weight behind them. You learned that your peace is worth more than constant justification. You spent so much time trying to explain yourself, your thoughts, your silence, your choices, just to be met with confusion or criticism. You thought clarity would bring connection, but it only brought exhaustion. Every explanation became a negotiation. Every boundary needed defending. Eventually, you realized something powerful. Peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from no longer needing to be. You stopped chasing validation in conversations that drained you. You started prioritizing your inner stillness over the noise of others' expectations. The moment you let go of explaining yourself to people who never really wanted to understand. That's when your mind got quieter. That's when the anxiety lifted. You chose peace, not performance, and now you protect that peace like it's sacred, because it is. You stopped explaining your silence because you know your quiet is intentional. There came a time when you realized your silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. You weren't withdrawing because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because you saw everything too clearly. The noise, the manipulation, the shallow conversations, it all drained you. You used to feel guilty for going quiet, like you owed people your energy, your thoughts, your emotional labor, but not anymore. Now your silence is a boundary. It's your way of choosing peace over performance, truth over approval. You don't raise your voice to be heard. You simply walk away from anything that doesn't resonate with your values. Your quiet isn't emptiness, it's clarity. And if someone doesn't understand that, you've learned not to explain it, because those who truly see you already know. You walked away from people who demanded access but never gave understanding. You reached a point where you realized that not everyone deserves access to you, especially those who never tried to truly understand you. They expected your loyalty, your energy, your time, without ever offering empathy in return. You were always the one trying, always the one explaining, always the one hoping they'd finally see the depth behind your quiet presence. But all they saw was what they wanted from you, not who you really were. And so you walked away, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You stopped explaining your worth to people who never tried to understand it in the first place, because you finally understood this. Your peace begins where their entitlement ends. You stopped apologizing for setting boundaries that protect your energy. There was a time when setting boundaries made you feel guilty, like you were being selfish or cold. You worried about hurting feelings, disappointing others, or being misunderstood. So you overextended, tolerated disrespect, and stayed available far past your breaking point. But eventually, you realized something powerful. Protecting your energy isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You stopped apologizing for the space you needed, the silence you chose, and the limits you drew. Because every time you honored your boundaries, you reclaimed a piece of yourself. And the people who truly value you, they never needed an apology to respect them. You realized your emotional depth doesn't need to be translated for shallow minds. You used to exhaust yourself trying to explain your emotions in a language others could grasp, breaking down your depth into smaller pieces just to be understood. But over time, you saw the pattern. Shallow minds don't want depth. They want simplicity, control, predictability, and you were none of those things. So you stopped trying to make your inner world digestible for people who lacked the capacity to respect it. You realized your emotional depth isn't a problem to solve or a mystery to decode. It's a strength, and it doesn't need to be watered down to make others comfortable. It simply needs to be protected. You notice that the right people never needed explanations to respect your choices. You stop chasing understanding when you realize something powerful. The people who genuinely respect you don't need a full explanation to honor your decisions. They don't question your silence, your boundaries, or your detachment, because they recognize that it comes from thoughtfulness, not coldness. You began to see the difference between those who only wanted access to you and those who actually valued your peace. That shift changed everything. You no longer felt the need to justify your moves, soften your words, or over-explain your perspective. The right people simply get it, and the rest, they never truly saw you in the first place. You chose to live authentically, even if it meant walking alone. You stopped compromising who you are just to keep others comfortable. At some point, you realized that constantly adjusting yourself to fit into shallow spaces only left you feeling disconnected and drained. So you made a choice, one most people are too afraid to make. You chose authenticity, even when it cost you relationships, approval, and the illusion of belonging. It wasn't easy. It meant walking alone more often, but the freedom you gained from being fully yourself, without masks, without explanations, was worth the silence. Now your path is quieter, but it's yours, and that's where real strength lives. You've reached a point where words feel unnecessary. You've tried explaining your boundaries, your silence, your way of thinking, but most people didn't really listen. They weren't interested in understanding, they were interested in control, approval, or comfort. So instead of wasting your energy trying to be heard, you chose a different route. You let your actions speak, your life, the way you carry yourself, what you allow, what you walk away from. It says everything. The people who truly understand you don't need an explanation. And the ones who don't, you've learned that convincing them isn't your responsibility. If this spoke to you, it's because you're done explaining yourself too. You're choosing peace over proving and truth over validation. Keep protecting your energy. If you felt understood here, subscribe or come back anytime you need to feel seen without having to say a word. You don't explain yourself anymore because your life speaks for itself.